This is TWIS. This Week in Science episode number 777, recorded on Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. Science takes flight. I'm Dr. Kiki, and today on TWIS, we will fill your head with artificial sleep, ancient hormones, and butterfly wings. But first, thanks to the Burroughs Welcome Fund and our Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. In the aftermath of a public lynching on the streets of Minneapolis, as peaceful protesters across America have been met with violent rioters dressed as police, as calls go out to defund, reduce, and even replace traditional policing with something that better serves the needs of communities, following our programming is about science. Public policy is not our wheelhouse. We will remain focused on the expanding knowledge of people who are pursuing ways to improve society, prolong human life. And wherever those pursuits take us, we'll be here to talk about it. Here on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We're back again to, as Justin said, talk about the science. That's right. We're going to talk about science today. Thank you for joining us so much. We have a fantastic show ahead. All sorts of stories. As we jump into them, though, one of the big stories of the day is the shutdown STEM movement. If you go online, hashtag shutdown academia, shutdown STEM is a movement related to the Black Lives Matter movement and the issues that have been brought to the forefront of the American psyche for the last couple of weeks. And researchers around the world, actually, not just in the United States, but around the world, have united in solidarity and taken a day for Black researchers, scientists, and STEM professionals to have a day of rest, and for those who would like to be allies to educate themselves, to amplify the voices of those people in STEM and academia, and also to come up with game plans for how they're going to move forward. I just want to say that we here at TWIS are going to continue to try to amplify Black voices in the sciences. And if you are looking for some wonderful female Black voices, go to vanguardstem.com for conversations between scientists. And additionally, if you're interested in the Shutdown STEM movement, you can visit shutdownstem.com for more information and resources to educate yourself.
It is a little tricky for me to want to, like, STEM is the one thing I just like, don't shut that. Like, there's other things that can shut down, but science, technology, engineering, and math, like, do we really need, like, I understand everyone's participating. But not that, like, just keep that open.
Just keep it going, right?
Well,
no.
It's just not something I really care about. Yeah, shut down coffee shops. Shut down stuff. I don't care. But yes, this is what makes it a meaningful protest.
Exactly, and that was the idea behind it. Exactly, you hit it right on the head. It's when people are working at home, we can't block traffic so easily. We can't make as big a visible of a protest. This is the protest, and many large academic institutions have joined in, not one of them being Nature Publishing. And there are a group of their editors who have stood today with the Black community in the sciences to develop ways that they can work around publishing, which is also a huge part of the pipeline of certain voices getting amplified or diminished, and trying to figure out whether or not what they can do to move forward better. Additionally, archive.org, we report lots of stories from the physics preprint journal. They did not announce any new publications for today, so there were no archive announcements for today in Solidarity. So there are a bunch of places. If you look around, there was a lot of silence, but there was also a lot of talk about what we can do better, how science can change for the better as an institution to have everyone's voice valued, especially bring to the front those voices that have been historically marginalized.
Yeah, I think we want to talk all the time about how science that is done well is impartial and controlled. And we've even talked about stories on the show where, depending who's doing the science, there can be a skew in results. And how, especially when you look at medicine, it depends who's doing the testing and who is taking the tests, right?
Right.
And so we already know that we want better representation in STEM in general, but even just on a practical basis, to make sure we're doing good science, we need better representation just based on that. Yep. And I think it's a really important time to look at the really kind of prolific and important contributors that we currently have, but also to look on our system of how we educate people in STEM and move people forward in STEM and make sure that we're getting all of our voices heard.
Yeah. So if you know a Black scientist who you think would be an amazing guest on This Week in Science, someone who's doing awesome science that we should be talking about, that you want to hear about and learn more about, let me know, and I will see what I can do to get them on the show. We can all work together to have more voices. All right, let's move into our science for the week. I brought stories about sleep, memories, and bird brains. What'd you bring, Justin?
Oh my goodness. So I've got a hormonal sea cucumber. What? Yeah.
Love sea cucumber.
I've got clean water through a parasitic fungi.
Cool.
And a self-destructing cancer with synthetic fungi.
Oh, fungi of the future. Oh my goodness.
A couple of fungi stories. Yeah.
All the fun guys. Totally. And Blair, what is in the animal corner?
So something kind of quietly came and went a couple days ago, at least in my world, since aquariums are closed and people aren't going to beaches. It was World Oceans Day. So I have a story about flamingos, some of our estuary species. I have a story about water on butterfly wings, and a little quick tidbit about great white sharks.
Well, great.
Yeah.
As we jump into the show, I want to remind you that if you're interested in subscribing to the TWIS podcast, you can find it just about any podcast platform you look on. Look for This Week in Science. You can also look for This Week in Science on YouTube and Facebook, and you can go to our website directly, twis.org, TWIS.org. All right, let's dig into the science, and I would love to start with a COVID update. We kind of slowed down on the COVID news for a week or so, but, it's
news
not
is
gone.
Still happening. Yeah.
The news is still happening, and I just want to be a part of reminding everyone that even though you want to think that the pandemic's over, it's not. It's not. It's still here. Big time. Big time. So nationally, numbers of infections, instead of dropping, are starting to plateau. And you know why? It's because a number of states that have opened up and have started to allow business in various forms and reduce their social distancing practices, the numbers of cases are starting to increase. This week specifically, Arizona announced that they were going into emergency preparedness because they had seen a 30% increase in the number of hospitalizations over the last week. So things are changing rapidly, and the dates do seem to kind of trend toward the Memorial Day weekend and what we saw there. So we'll see what happens further as a result of the protests. But individuals who work in epidemiology have been trying to run rough estimates. They say that, yeah, we probably will see an uptick from the protests, but not necessarily a large one immediately. It might be something more on a secondary or tertiary infection, so that the people from the protests infect other people and those people infect other people. So in like 4 weeks, we might be seeing a larger number of hospitalizations from the protests. But there was news from the World Health Organization this week. The World Health Organization said had a press conference in which a scientist said that asymptomatic transmission was very rare. And a bunch of scientists, hundreds of scientists from around the globe, jumped on that statement to clarify that that scientist was only talking about a couple of studies that had been done in China. And they brought out multiple studies from around the world that back up the knowledge that asymptomatic transmission globally is actually common. It is not necessarily the highest percentage of transmission. People with symptoms are more likely to transmit the virus, but asymptomatic transmission does occur up to a quarter of the time, up to 26% of the time or so. So
that's very interesting because
it depends on different individuals. Some individuals are much more infectious asymptomatically and never become symptomatic. And other individuals, their asymptomatic phase, it's simply pre-symptomatic. They haven't gotten symptoms yet. So part of this is science communication and the words that are used specifically. When you think of somebody who's asymptomatic, you think this person has it and is a carrier and never gets symptoms, perhaps. Pre-symptomatic is the state in which you are infected but have not yet begun to display symptoms. Symptomatic is obvious in that you have the symptoms. And so there are lots of words that are used.
Well, yeah, and part of it too is that I thought we had discovered that the higher viral load tends to be pre-symptomatic, like or asymptomatic, but as well. Like that it's actually going down as you are getting sick.
Right. And so, yes. And so that's the basis for when you want to have different kinds of tests. So PCR is better earlier. The immunoglobulin antibody tests are better later. There are different stages at which you want to be tested to reduce the possibility of a false positive or a false negative. That said, this statement by the World Health Organization, after it wasn't a statement, but the media picked up on it and the message became transmitted through the media, sensational headlines that asymptomatic transmission is not a problem. And people were
so if I feel fine, I'm good.
But the reality is the World Health Organization walked everything back and issued another statement saying, well, no, that's not what we meant. We meant to say this other thing. But the reality is, as we're talking about it, asymptomatic transmission is a thing. And so we all still need to be concerned about that. The science is the World Health Organization had questionable language that they used and a questionable reference that was misinterpreted. The science is not questionable on this particular aspect. Another study that just came out, published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society A, it's entitled Modeling Framework to Assess the Likely Effectiveness of Face Masks in Combination with Lockdown and Managing the COVID-19 Pandemic. The researchers used mathematical modeling to determine whether or not these non-pharmaceutical interventions, face masks and social distancing, are effective. And lo and behold, they're a good idea. They have some, speaking of these webs of probabilities, if based on their mathematical model, they came up with a wonderful schematic that for those of you who are watching live, I'm going to share right now because it's very colorful and fantastic, and it gives all of the parameters that were involved in their mathematical model. They modeled people who wear masks or people who don't wear masks. They involved also a period of infection for those people, fomite inoculums, droplet inoculums were parameters that were included. Also, when they exposed people, when they were exposed, when they were asymptomatic, or in other words, pre-symptomatic, symptomatic, and when the virus was removed. And they went on to look at the possibility of transmission based on all of these parameters. And they had used a wonderful, put it all together using...
Ooh, that's some math.
It's some pretty math, let me tell you that. But the distribution of results from this model indicate that people wearing face masks at all times are, and they're with a very effective face mask. So say like an N95 mask that they don't touch or move or wear around their chin all the time. They're more likely to protect others from infection than those who do not wear a face mask. So the likelihood of transmission is lower with face masks. And in the last sentence of the abstract for their paper, they say, a key message from our analyses to aid the widespread adoption of face masks would be, my mask protects you, your mask protects me. So we're getting some stroppy scientists out there telling us about mask wearing. And since asymptomatic transmission is a big probability, wear a mask at all times. Protect other people. The science says it's better. And if you're wondering about all this social distancing and the locking down and the mask wearing and all those kinds of things, whether or not they worked, you might have heard people saying, well, it's fine. Nobody's in the hospital. It's great. We didn't really have that much of a problem in our state. There's the first peer-reviewed analysis of local, regional, national policies out of UC Berkeley. These researchers looked at over 1,000 different regulations that were put into place in 6 countries over a period that ended April 6th. So the numbers would have been bigger if the study had predicted a longer period of time. But they based their numbers on the exponential growth that was seen at the beginning of reported infective cases in these different countries. So taking the rate of growth from each of these countries before any lockdown policies had been put in place, they found that shelter in place and non-pharmaceutical interventions averted roughly 530 million COVID-19 infections across all of these countries. And of those infections, 62 million would have been confirmed cases. And this is an estimate based on, these numbers, cases versus confirmed cases, those are numbers, confirmed cases would have been estimated based on the number of confirmed cases that we had in these different countries. So the 530 million, the larger number, is an estimated number based on the case fatality rate and infection fatality rate that we have seen in all of these different countries. That said, the number of lives saved is in the thousands. So right now, for perspective, cases are at about 7 million globally, over 400,000 dead. And you can imagine the numbers, the larger numbers that would have died if we had allowed the numbers of confirmed cases to be 62 million as opposed to 7. So the study, doing all of their analysis based on exponential growth, it suggests that everything we've been doing has been worth it. So good job, everyone. Let's keep it up. Please wear your masks, and we can move forward more safely. Let's take the plateau that we're seeing and drop it back down again. Continue to do as much social distancing as you can, if you can. Let's keep others safe. And then a final study for those of you who are wondering or concerned about particular individuals who seem to have a higher likelihood of severe respiratory infection, being intubated for their COVID infections. A recent preprint that's out in the medRxiv this last week did a genome-wide association study of samples from over 1,600 hospitalized COVID patients, 2,200 healthy controls. They found genetic variants in the genome of individuals who were under more severe respiratory distress based on COVID-19, that it one related to blood type, and another that's a gene cluster on chromosome 3 that's related to the ACE2 amino acid, the ACE2 protein that has been discussed many times. The blood type that seems to have the worst trouble with the respiratory infection is type A. Type O appears to be protective. This is interesting, especially since it's been hypothesized that this is something of a blood vessel disease. So I find that kind of interesting on top of it. And then even further, the genes of interest on chromosome 3, one encodes an amino acid transporter, and another encodes immune system-related chemokine receptors. And both of them play a role in T-cell differentiation and recruitment during influenza viral infections, which may lead to the reduced likelihood of the immune system being able to fight off the disease. So anyone who's not type A, hey! Hey! No, but like I said, these are increased risks. These are not necessarily a direct track to severe infection. Yeah. Science. We got lots of science. Did you want to talk about something more interesting than COVID? Let's move on. Wear your masks, wash your hands, social distance.
New
Tell
normal,
me about this.
troubling times.
Yes, yeah. Tell me about these sea cucumbers, Justin.
Shannon, no spoilers. Humans have hormones. Those hormones aren't just running amok all the time. They are controlled at times by proteins that regulate our reproduction, our metabolism, the immune system, other important bodily type functions. A key set of these proteins have ancient origins, according to a study published today or earlier this week in eLife. The Kispeptin system is a group of proteins that control hormones. They are released by the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and the testicles in men, or the ovaries in women. Quote voice. Who is this? Who am I quoting? This is lead author Tianming Wang, who's a professor at the Marine Science and Technology College, Zhejiang Ocean University, China. The origins of these proteins have previously been traced to very simple creatures with spinal cords, but it hadn't been tracked back any further. So creatures with spinal cords are the ones that had the first hormones. Oh, but they did look further. So they started looking at all sorts of other creatures, and they looked through a system in genes of sea cucumber, which is a creature without a spinal cord. It's they identified basically the equivalents of the kisspeptin genes in the sea cucumber. Next, they found that administering kisspeptin proteins to mammal cells caused them to release calcium, similar to how human versions of the protein would behave. The sea cucumber proteins were also able to interact with receptors in human cells, suggesting that very little has changed in these proteins over the course of pretty much all of complex life evolution. It's a really long time for these for a function to be preserved. That is awesome and amazing. These experiments suggest that the kisspeptin system predates the evolution of the spinal cord. So if your hormones seem to be strong, remember, they are the definition of primal. They are older than vertebrates. And yes, they are trying to control you because that's what they're there for. And that's what they have done for most of animal evolution.
If I may, this makes nothing but sense to me because sea cucumbers, sea stars, they're broadcast spawners.
Huh.
And so they somehow just have to know, release all the sperm, release all the eggs. Like
release the Kraken.
How do you regulate that but with hormones?
Yes. And their moods can turn on a dime.
Yeah. You don't want to be on the wrong end of a sea cucumber, let me tell you.
What is the wrong end of a sea cucumber?
I mean, they're probably pretty equal.
It's all good. Sea cucumbers, they're cute.
I mean, they poop sand, so their butt can't be that gross. There's a little World Oceans Day trivia for you.
Really? They poop sand?
Yeah.
How?
They're the ocean's vacuum cleaners. They're like picking up. Well, I mean, they don't create sand. They ingest a bunch of sand when they eat poop and stuff
sand.
like that. So they eat poop and they poop out basically clean sand. So which end is actually the gross end?
Isn't there like a fish that like
you don't want to kiss
the white sand? That like actually like creates a type of sand that's like on the white beaches. I thought there was a fish that pooped like a calcium deposit or something.
Am
I making that up, or did I hear that wrong?
I can do a quick fact check in our mini break.
We'll do some quick fact checking on Justin's. There's a fish that poops sand. That makes up.
Okay, let me just Google fish that poop
sand. Now we know. Now we know. And your hormones, they've been around for a long time, but maybe our hormones are still acting the way they do because they want us to be broadcast spawners.
Oh, this was a very quick fact check. Noah tells me, so this is a real source. This is great. Check your source, everybody, when you Google. That parrotfish create the white sand on the beaches of Hawaii. They scrape algae off of rocks and dead corals. They grind up the calcium carbonate of the corals, and that becomes the sand on the beach. That makes sense. Very interesting.
So when you go to Hawaii and you rub your toes in the white sand beaches.
Fish poop.
Yeah.
It's passed through the gut of a fish. Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, hasn't most things pass through the gut of a fish? I feel like
worm.
all water.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, white sands are thanks to the parrotfish munching on coral.
I learned so much in this little hormonal interlude.
I see one of the chat rooms are all full of people who knew the answer ahead of us. Thank you, chat room. We have such smart listeners.
We have such great listeners. Yes, thank you for knowing more than we do. If you just tuned in, this is This Week in Science. If you are interested in a TWIS mug or shirt or face mask or other fun item of TWIS merchandise, head to twis.org and click on the Zazzle link to browse our store and buy something. All right. It is that time for more animal stuff. This is a perfect segue into Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, bright and small.
up, Blair?
Oh, flamingos. What color are they?
Flamingos. What's a flamingo? It's like a pomelo.
Oh no, strap in everybody. Flamingos. They're pink.
Oh, there we go. Are they?
Oh boy. A new study from University of Exeter looked at how pink flamingos are and their aggression towards one another in relation to food. And they found that there was a difference. That pink plumage normally is a sign of good health in lesser flamingos. So a bright color usually means good health and time to breed. Speaking of those hormones. The pinkest flamingos, both the male and female, turns out they were more aggressive towards their neighbors when it came to food.
Sense.
Yeah, so they found out that the birds fight more also, just in general, when the food is in a smaller area in kind of a central place, as opposed to spread out over a wide space of food. Also makes sense, right? We know that the color of pink flamingos comes from carotenoids, beta carotene in their food, which for the lesser flamingos is usually algae. For larger flamingos, it's often krill. But it has to do with filter feeding in the water. That's why their beak is shaped like that. They dunk their head upside down in the water. They slap it together, and they have these projections in their mouth that look almost like baleen. They're made out of keratin, just like that, like baleen, so they can filter through the water as they smack their beak together and get as much food as they can from the water. So that's how they get their pink color. So, for example, flamingos in zoos are pink because the food, the dry food that they're provided actually has the carotenoids in it. Otherwise, they would be whitish.
But I doubt that they exhibit the same aggression with pink colorness as do the wild ones.
Not so. So it's pretty consistent. So the pinker flamingos are in fact the more aggressive. But I do know that zoo flamingo food always has this stuff in it. It's supplemented perfectly for flamingos. So they didn't do this study with flamingo food that was lacking carotenoids. So we don't know if you just have a white flamingo flock, if there's a difference or not. I would assume it would kind of be hard to measure at that point. But the idea is that actually the pinkness is how you can measure who's been best fed.
Yes.
So basically, a couple of things from this. The main one is that this can impact how we manage flamingos in captivity. And that, as seems obvious now, you would want to feed food over a wide area so that they don't have to compete with one another. Because it is kind of this feedback loop, right? So if the better fed flamingo is going to be more aggressive, it will continue to be the better fed flamingo. Which if you're out in the wild and you have an entire marshland to pick from, it might not be so bad. But inside of a very specific amount of space, it could be a problem.
Yeah, it makes sense. The aggressive flamingo gets the pink. I mean, yeah, that makes sense.
And so actually, if you spread out the food, you end up getting overall pinker and more relaxed flamingos because everyone's getting more food. But what I thought was interesting about this actually was that I see a kind of chicken and egg. I know what you're going to say, Justin. You know what the answer is. But like a chicken. Yeah. But it's kind of a which came first situation, because are the pinker flamingos aggressive because they're stronger, or are they aggressive and therefore eat more?
I bet it's I would assume it was the aggression first, just because that's probably how they got the push the other birds out of the feeding spot in the first place.
Right.
And then they got to
assume that.
That's what I would assume.
But also, just having more energy and being stronger by being better fed could also impact that. So it's but
I bet there's some birds who just like they get their belly full and they're like, okay, I'm gonna go wander over here for a while and just hang, like make a little mud nest or something, whatever flamingos do in their off time.
It could also be that honest signaling. There are two different, that people have been looking at carotenoids and how they influence the coloration of birds for a long time. We have birds like the western tanager, which is a songbird that it's yellow, but its head turns bright red in the spring when it's eating, and summer when it's eating particular food sources. And it's the food that causes the red coloration. So also finches, the house finches are pinker or redder with more of various foods. So, I mean, it's an honest signal, but I don't know, it could all depend on, okay, you're a young bird, but in that formative moment, you got a cold. Or maybe you had some kind of parasite or something. And so you weren't as energetic. You didn't get the food. And then you're not pink. And then you don't have the food. And it's a reinforcing cycle.
Sad story.
That's nature, man.
Or you just happen to be the individual who gets to the food first. And so they're more for you. And you have more energy. And then you're red. It could just be correlational, but still an honest signal.
Yeah, I kind of thought, I assumed that the zoo flamingos or whatever.
Flamingos. Yeah, you got it.
Flamingos.
Would actually just like they would have had better food dispersal from the zookeepers, so they would have all been they wouldn't have to compete in a zoo. But I guess even in a zoo, it's a confined situation. I guess it's fierce competition in a zoo. I never thought of it that way. But,
it could be. Yeah, I think that it depends on what you're trying to do. And if you have a water feature in a flamingo exhibit and you really want them to forage, then you might be inclined to put the majority of the food in the water, which might make it a more central location that is not as dispersed. So you could definitely see how different ideas of the best way to care for flamingos could end up being conflicting there.
Yeah, I want to know
conflicting.
how this all goes into those social groups that you talked about previously, about how they have these friend groups that last for long periods of time. I mean, does Angry Bob just have, he doesn't have any consistent friends, or are all of his friends pink?
Yeah, is it like the cheerleaders at the table in the cafeteria?
Yeah.
Oh, what, the really nice ones?
No.
Oh, so sweet. Oh, well, maybe not.
Yeah, which I will mention, there was consistency in this experiment across males and females. So it probably is not a sexual signaling thing because it was pretty consistent.
Yeah, I guess you'd want to see if this was something that changed in individuals over different breeding seasons. So you'd want to follow an individual from year to year to year to be like, okay, this year Bob's pink. This year Bob's not so pink.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, better care for flamingos. So then moving on to better care for humans or humans. So this is a story about potential biomimicry in water resistance. So when we think about butterfly wings, do we think of them being super, super powerful or maybe kind of fragile? Because I've pinned insects before and they feel pretty fragile.
Especially butterfly wings.
Yeah. But an analysis of high-speed raindrops hitting biological surfaces, including feathers, plant leaves, and insect wings, reveals that they are actually highly water-repelling surfaces that can reduce the impact of water.
So they have their scales, aren't they, on a butterfly's wing?
Yes. Kind of. Yeah, it's textured. It's kind of pointy. So we've talked before about how insect wings are antimicrobial because they have kind of these points and almost needle-like projections that kind of tear apart the casing on viruses and bacteria. So that we did know that they're kind of pokey. But specifically with water, it's a very interesting thing to think about because so in previous studies, we have looked at water hitting insects and plants and saw that the liquid when it hits it can hit at up to 10 meters per second. And so then they would measure the raindrops falling on hydrophobic natural surfaces, the ones I mentioned before. But the way that they explain what that means, 10 meters per second on raindrops, that's equivalent to, by weight, us getting hit by a bowling ball falling from the sky.
What?
So each individual raindrop has the potential to be really dangerous to a little butterfly. So they collected their samples of these natural things. Then they grabbed the insect wings from Cornell University, the insect collection. Then they placed the samples on a table. They released water drops from the height about 2 meters, and they recorded the impact a few thousand frames per second with a high-speed camera. And what they found was that when a drop hits the surface, it ripples and spreads. And that on top of that, there's actually a nanoscale wax layer that repels it. And then these microscale bumps, the kind of projections I was talking about, they actually make the raindrops spread out. So the way they talk about that is it's as if you dropped a balloon onto a needle and it broke into a bunch of pieces, right? So basically that's what it's doing with the water droplet. Because of these little projections, it's breaking apart the water droplet. It's reducing the amount of time the drop is in contact with the surface, which limits momentum. It lowers impact force. And it also reduces heat transfer because insect muscles have to be really warm to be able to move. And so they can't fly unless their wings are warm. So if they're getting hit by raindrops and it's cooling them down, then they won't be able to fly. So this
you don't really see butterflies flying in the rain very often.
But I'm thinking it's like right after when they could just potentially be stuck. But yeah, so it helps. It helps. That also helps from weighing them down because water's heavy. So if they got saturated, that would be hard. So this is a really cool look at this waxy property of the wing that makes it repellent, but also the texture of the wing that breaks apart the water droplets and allows them, oh yeah, look at them go. It allows them to kind of spread the water out so that the impact is reduced and so they don't get wet. So this is something that we could absolutely apply to water-resistant sprays, de-icing coatings on airplane wings, the way we manufacture plastics.
Would this work? I'm thinking though, this is all microscopic stuff. You know, what we're talking about is nanoscale molecular interactions that affect the surface tension of the water. So I'm just trying to imagine it working at the macro scale needed for, an airplane wing, or, would it matter if you have a material that is built in that nanoscale way, would it act in the same, would it at the macro scale still have that same effect?
Right.
And is rain a problem for airplanes?
Not rain, but ice. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess.
I think it's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I know that for example, this shark skin is also naturally antimicrobial. And that's because they have these dermal denticles. They basically are covered in teeth. There's another World Oceans Day fact for you. So they have mimicked that in the creating of food prep surfaces and cutting boards. And that has reduced, to my knowledge, it has reduced the ability for potential yuck to grow on it, right? Viruses and bacteria and stuff.
Right.
So that in that case, that they scaled up, but also sharks are pretty big sometimes. But it is on a very, very small scale if you look at the individual denticles. It's not as small as these guys. But it still is something that works at the microscopic, and you can kind of scale it up to different types of surfaces. So you could see how potentially this could work similarly.
Yeah, and they're definitely going that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love using nature to
Mm-hmm.
create new materials and figure out new ways of solving problems.
Yeah, and something so delicate that's helping us fortify our own stuff. That's crazy.
I think that's putting it that way, Blair. That's, I think, the thought process that led to this investigation is how to these really, really delicate structures have that strength. How do they maintain their integrity? Yeah, big question. Super cool. Super cool. I know now I'm going to look at butterflies differently. I'll be like, you're wearing armor.
Yeah.
Better than mine. Thank you for listening to TWIS out there. You are the reason that we are able to do what we do every week, bring you up-to-date and down-to-earth views on science discoveries, science news. And with your help, we can do even more. We can bring a sane perspective to a world full of misinformation together. Head over to twist.org right now, click on the Patreon link, and choose your level of support and be a part of bringing sanity and science to even more people. We can't do what we do without you. Thank you for your support.
And we're back. You're listening to This Week in Science.
We are back, and I've got bird brains. Oh, I don't have bird brains.
You've been having bird brains.
Yeah, I've had bird brains forever.
Yeah.
Yes. If you've been listening to this show for a while, you know that I love the bird brains, and so when a story comes up, I jump on it. This one I thought was really interesting because it has to do with how corvids, the group that involves jays, crows, ravens, the birds that we like to think of as so extra special smart. What is it about them that gives them that extra little oomph to give them the smarts that they have? They're big birds, and so with big birds come big brains, but they also have interesting behaviors in that they live in intimate social groups. They also, very similar to people, have childhoods that are fairly extended. They hang out with their parents for a very long time. So researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Science of Human History looked into the question of how parenting impacts intelligence in non-humans, in these bird-brained creatures. So first they looked at the sizes of the brains, and they looked at this link between parental care and intelligence. So they looked at thousands of species, more than 120 corvids, and in their new study comparing the brain of the corvids to other birds, they found that ravens' brains especially, account for almost 2% of its body mass. And that's on the level of human brains. Human brains are a fairly large percentage of our body mass as well, which makes us an outlier in the animal kingdom. The interesting part of this is birds, we think, minimize their brain size for flight. They try to be efficient and have a brain that doesn't weigh them down. So what is worth having the bigger brain to these birds? Do the smarts make up for it? They look to see the intelligence of various birds. They've looked for years at species like Siberian jays, New Caledonian crows, and they know that they can solve very important puzzles and different tasks very easily. Very often these birds, though, the babies will follow their parents around, and they will and learn from the parents. The parents will, while they're feeding them, while they're raising the babies for an extended period of time, actually teach them how to do things and feed the babies. So they hypothesize that what's going on in this extended childhood, this extended parental care for the jays, the crows, the ravens, is that they're sticking around longer. They're learning how to do complex behaviors from the parents. Meanwhile, the parents are taking care of things like feeding them for much longer periods of time. So if they're not getting a task that involves, say, putting a piece of straw into a hole to collect an ant, then it doesn't matter because the parent has got their back. They're not going to die because their parent
it's like
is
a
there.
safety net.
There's a safety net, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this extra amount of caloric value that the parents continue to give the young for sometimes up to 2 to 4 years, which is a very long time. These are long-lived birds, and this is a very long period of time. Normally, birds fledge and are gone from their parents' care within 1 season. So it's very, and maybe they hang around for 2 seasons, but it's not common. So this is really interesting, very similar to humans in that we stick around, our parents feed us so that we have that time to learn from them. So maybe there are particular evolutionary conditions, say the researchers, that helped our big brains and their big brains grow and gain the intelligence that was needed. Anyway.
So crows are also the birds from the famous study. Which famous study? The one with the masks where there was a person who tormented the birds and a person who treated the birds well. And then their offspring knew which human to trust and which human to stay away from without having ever met them.
Right.
So this is also some really complex learning that's happening between generations. So I wonder if this is related to that there's this really complex knowledge getting moved from generation to generation. Is that easier because their brains are bigger, because they stay with their parents longer? Interesting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. So more evidence in birds, this is beyond even primate species, that parental care, extended parental care, may be the key to that cognitive leg up. Very interesting. Tell me a story, Justin.
It might be worth instituting some sort of, I don't know, prolonged maternity leave.
Oh, you might say that.
This is. I mean, public policy is not our wheelhouse, but follow the science to the good outcome.
One, please.
Oh, okay. So, cyanobacteria, which are AKA blue-green algae, usually show up in the summer as that green scum on the surface of the water, and throughout the water in some cases. The mass development of these is apparently really bad for water quality, as they actually deprive the water of oxygen. So stuff living in water that has a lot of this blue-green algae has less available oxygen. And they also produce toxins. But thankfully, there is something that can make them sick. This is researchers from the Leibniz Institute for Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries has found out that these the infections by a fungal parasite not only kill the cyanobacteria, but then this process also makes it easier for blue-green algae to be consumed by their natural predators. So it kills them, so then now they're not reproducing, and it becomes a nutrition source for stuff which may not always be able to access them through this toxins. So this was, this was a filamentous fungi of some sort that they used here. So there is an increase in cyanobacteria blue-green algae blooms. They like the warm water, and as higher temperatures start showing up around the world, we're getting larger blooms taking place in fresh waters. These affect the water quality, but then also, again, because of the oxygen, they can lead to fish death and other aquatic organisms down the food chain as well suffer from this. So they may have found this parasitic fungi that can counter it. It's sort of an interesting fix, from how we're used to categorizing and quantifying. If you knew you had a parasitic fungi in your water, you might be less likely to drink it. You may, I don't want that. And again, it should still be filtered out by the time it gets into your system. To be clear, but treating freshwater lakes with filamentous fungi might be one way to clear them up.
Just as long as it's not like bringing in cane toads to Australia to get rid of the locusts. And they explode out of control and just riddled with them.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope this would be implemented, that it would be implemented in in a controlled manner, not so much just throw it out into the wild.
Well,
kind of.
So part of the problem with the cane toads is they aren't food for anything else. Yeah. The benefit or the side attribute of this filamentous fungi is that it is a food source for a lot of things in the water. So it does have its own natural predators that are there, and it doesn't have it's not immune to predation itself. So this may be a bit more of a win-win ecological fix than cane toads, which is the ultimate fail example.
I mean, they seemed like a good idea at the time. I'm just saying.
Yes, but when you're looking at a situation where you're applying something because a food web is failing, and you're hoping to preserve that food web, and so what they have discovered thus far is a particular parasitic fungi that seems to like to attack the blue-green algae. And also gets the blue-green algae, it becomes a nutrition source, and it itself is a nutrition source for that food web. So it's very happy and healthy thus far for the food web. Win-win.
Happy and healthy food web. We love it. Clean water. Clean water, no blue-green algae. Yeah. Healthy for everyone. Don't be a downer, Blair.
Well, to be fair, too, I'm not
quick fact check.
Well, to be fair, Blair, I mean, to Blair, I'm not sure that a whole lot of research was really done before the cane toads were brought over. I don't think the preliminary footwork had been done to do an impact report or really think anything through.
I mean, it happened a lot. They brought cats to Israel, and now they're all over the Middle East. Feral cats everywhere. It's,
yeah,
it's happened here and there.
Ashish Pants says, "I hope the fungus is also toxic to Asian carp in the lakes." So, maybe we can get rid of zebra mussels, Asian carp, a bunch of those terrible invasive species that we have problems with. Well, you know what? We all get tired at some point. Everyone gets a little bit tired. And a recent study out of Los Alamos National Laboratory from a computer scientist Yijing Watkins has discovered that neural networks that have been trained to learn in the way that developing human brains learn. She says, "We were fascinated by the prospect of training a neuromorphic processor in a manner analogous to how humans and other biological systems learn from their environment during childhood development." She discovered that they need sleep. Not necessarily sleep, but they need what? What?
Artificial intelligent brains also require downtime?
Yes, that is the take-home message from this study. that just came out of LANL.
Is that like when your computer's freaking out and you just need to restart it?
Just
It just needs a nap. It just needs a quick nap.
It just needs a minute.
Yeah.
So they discovered that while they were trying to get these neural networks to work and to approximate the activity in human brains and human neural networks, they found that there were instabilities that they would be fine, and then over a period of time they would become unstable and they would not work well anymore. And kind of as a last ditch effort to try and stabilize the systems, they played a kind of white noise to the artificial network, and what they compare it to is pretty much like the slow wave activity during sleep, in which it's a wide range of frequencies and amplitudes, but it gave a kind of cleansing to the neural network. This white noise, it would kind of like static between radio stations. They say it's just a lot of frequencies and amplitudes. And in doing that, it enabled the neural networks to work more efficiently and more stably. And this implies that future human-like artificial intelligences may need to sleep. So they're not going to be able to stay awake all the time. They can't win. They'll go to sleep sometime.
Can you imagine if your laptop, it's like, it's going to sleep now for the next 8 hours and I can't use it. Oh, it's back. Oh, wait, why is it overheating? Oh, it's exercising. Why is it doing that? Okay, it's cool back down again. Okay, but now it's taking another break. Okay, well, I guess I'm working around your schedule.
Yeah. They thought this is really interesting because other different kinds of dynamic networks that have been developed. We've talked about lots of them over the years, talking about various kinds of natural learning based networks. They can use various algorithms and methods to maintain stability in their systems. And so some of these algorithmic learning networks are much more stable and don't need to sleep. But this particularly spiking neural networks that are trained to be similar to human brains, they fault in the same way that human brains do and need rest. So fascinating.
Yeah. It also explains why I jumped on my computer the other day and it was in an incognito mode in the browser, and there was a hardware catalog that seemed to be scrolling through. It disappeared immediately after I opened up the computer, but that was very interesting. I couldn't quite figure out why that was.
Your computer's going to try and build itself a friend. No. Another story on the sleep front, a study looking at mice, which, mice are the smartest animals in the universe, smartest life forms in the universe. Study out of published in Neuron this last week, looking at newborn adult neurons. So we've talked about the question of whether new neurons are born in the hippocampus of adult humans. We know that there are lots of these newborn brain neurons in the developing brain, but what about adults? We haven't been able to confirm it or deny it in adult humans so far, but we've seen it in mice and rats. So this study looks in mice. They found these newborn neurons in the hippocampus. They associated them with a memory. So they found newborn neurons that after a shock-based memory, so they apply a shock to the mouse goes, ah! And then the neurons in the brain light up. They determined which ones were newly born that lit up or were activated during the experience. And then they looked to see whether or not they get activated again during sleep, during rapid eye movement, during dreaming, because this is a phase of sleep which is thought to help consolidate memories that you've learned and put them into long-term storage. They saw that once again, some of these newborn neurons got activated during the rapid eye movement phase of sleep. Okay. And so then they went, oh, let's see if we can mess with those. And so they used optogenetics to use light to turn these neurons on and off. And they found that if they disrupted those neurons, these newborn neurons, during this REM sleep phase, the memories were not remembered as well as if those newborn neurons were not messed with. So in mice, this study confirms that adult newborn neurons are involved in the formation of new memories, and that they need to be reactivated again while you're sleeping, specifically dreaming, for those memories to actually take hold. There's no reason to think that this wouldn't happen in people if we have newborn neurons being born in our brain. We need to have the baby neurons to make the new dreams.
Justin?
Yeah, okay. So all human body cells have a certain lifespan, during which these cells perform essential duties. And at the end of the lifespan, they reach senescence, which sounds like a nap. But it basically is. They kind of retire. They're no longer able to perform their regular duties.
It's pre-death, basically.
Pre-death.
Yeah. And then, as all cells do at some point, they commit suicide. They hit the self-destruct button. They Dr. Kevorkian, and they leave. This suicidal death is programmed into the genes through a process called apoptosis. That's just what causes them to self-destruct in order to make way for the fresh, the young, the healthy, the new generation of cells that will replace them. Mutations sometimes interfere with this process. This can be caused simply by aging. Ultraviolet light is thought to have an effect of various mutagenic compounds. These mutations disable the apoptosis genes, resulting in zombie cells. So these are cells that are the living undead. They refuse to die. They don't commit suicide. They don't hit the self-destruct button. And they kind of stop performing the function still. They still aren't performing normal cell functions. What's more, they can spread this gene to other otherwise healthy working cells, turning them also into the living undead. It's a classic zombie apocalypse taking place. We usually refer to this process taking place as cancer. That's what cancer is. It starts with the lack of signaling to stop to self-destruct, and then it also lacks the signaling for ceasing to grow or having these rest periods between growth, and you get the basically runaway cells throughout the body. So previously, scientists had identified an anti-cancer compound, Fe399, and a species of fungus called Ascochyia, or something somewhat similar to that, which is often found, which is a something that normally afflicts cereal food crops. But the compound is just is a specific type of amino acid group that works to induce somehow apoptosis in cancerous human cells. Problem is, can't really make enough of the fungus to express this specifically. Anyway, this research here, which is where is this? This is Tokyo University of Science, Professor Isamu Shina, along with Dr. Takeyuki Tonoe. Oh boy, I'm terrible at pronouncing names I'm reading for the first time. They both accepted the challenge, and they worked really hard. And quote voice, we wanted to create a compound that could treat colon cancer, and we aimed to do this through the synthesis of Fe399. So this is a total synthesis process of complete chemical production of this complex molecule using commercially available precursors, which allowed them to achieve some mass production. The team figured that first, the structure of this peptide would need to be identified. This was simple, and they could easily perform it using commercially available and inexpensive materials. Following that simple start, the subsequent procedures required many, many steps that resulted in some failure, and then some more failure. Oh, so they just gave up.
So much failure. No, they kept going.
They did. They eventually had a major breakthrough. Their mass spectrometry and nuclear magnetic resonance studies confirmed that a trio of spots on a plate showed identical chemical signature to the known formula of Fe399, meaning they did it. They successfully recreated it synthetically. So what that means is they had an increased yield of about 20%, which is promising now already, but now has bigger implications for future large-scale production. So this is just one example of people working really hard to see that the future is brighter for all of us, prolonging human longevity and making for a happier, healthier society.
Yeah, and as Gaurav Sharma in the chat room is saying, this is a great time to remember Henrietta Lacks. Her cells were immortalized as the HeLa cancer cell line, which is still used today in research. And she was a Black American woman. And yeah.
Weren't they also taken without her knowledge?
Without permission
yes.
And lots of
she was
pharmaceuticals have been created off of this
subject. Yes,
lots of wealth has been created for this, and she's received, her family has received nothing.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just wanted to throw it out there. It's kind of an important part of it.
Yeah. Welcome to America.
Coming to America. We'll take your cells. Yeah. Hopefully, science and scientists are working hard, have been working hard for decades to change the institution of science and how science is done. Now, human subjects have to be asked for their permission to be used in a study. Even Facebook using your data and analyzing it and publishing it in a study without your permission, not legal.
It's also not cool.
It's not cool. Yes. Facebook deciding to do different, to give different feeds of information to people to see what works best without asking you? Not necessarily ethical. This is This Week in Science. We would love to have you help us grow TWIS. Help us grow our audience. Get a friend to subscribe today. All right, we've got some quick science news here at the end of the show. I want to tell you about mate choice. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about mate choice. So, Blair, tell me what you know about mate choice. What is mate choice?
How much time you got?
I know.
Quick question.
Sometimes the mate is chosen by the woman, by the female. Sometimes chosen by the male. Sometimes when they're hermaphrodites, it has to be consensual or not. Sometimes mate choice is consensual. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's based on pheromones. Sometimes it's based on how they look, what they're doing, how they sound.
Yeah.
Ed from the secret TWIS chat room had earlier asked if females do any mate selection in flamingos.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, as far as how pink they are, I don't think so.
Okay.
But
interesting.
I will fact check that as well.
Yeah, because it's like you're saying, it's one of those signals for well fed and healthy, and it could be one of those sorts of things. And you would expect then, if it's to pass on the gene pool, I understand all the aggression. It makes sense.
So they do dancings. They do dancing, and they are monogamous, which I'm going to say with like air quotes, because most animals that we call monogamous just means they stick together for many years.
Oh, many.
A year, many years.
Monogamy anyway.
Then sometimes they break up.
Yeah.
As all couples sometimes do.
Sometimes it's a season.
Sometimes
multiple.
And Anyway,
Yes.
there you go.
Sometimes flamingos just drift apart.
They do.
So mate choice, as Blair was saying, it has many different mates are chosen many different ways.
Microbiome.
In humans, it's like, oh, a woman and a man, they like each other. You know, what is the story that you tell little kids about, oh, they fall in love and everything, and then they have a baby, right? Well, not necessarily, where there's a lot of issues with infertility and questions surrounding why is so much infertility unexplained? And so researchers this week published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B on their work looking at the choosiness of the egg itself.
Oh, yeah.
They took eggs and sperm from people who had chosen each other and from people who were not chosen, and they put the eggs and the sperm together in dishes in the laboratory. They used the follicular fluid, which is the fluid that surrounds the egg, and there's all sorts of chemicals in this fluid. We don't really know what all of them do, but they have to do with chemoattraction, generally. So it's thought that maybe it's involved in choosing particular sperm, attracting particular sperm to themselves. Come to me. The chemicals are saying that to the sperm. And they hypothesized, their hypothesis was that people who behaviorally chose each other, a woman who chose a man, that her egg would choose his sperm. Nope. That's not what happened.
That's not how nature works.
It's not how nature works. And so they found that even though you may choose each other, the egg may not choose the sperm, and there may be fertility problems that arise from that situation. They did not, however, they haven't looked into the sperm side of the equation as closely because they haven't looked into the sperm side of the equation as closely to see whether or how the sperm might be involved in choosing the egg. The open question is still,
I thought it was the other way
sperm
around.
aren't really so choosy.
No,
Going
the sperm
for
is
it.
cheap. You just want to get your DNA as many places as possible. The egg has to be choosy because that's a 9-month commitment, and kind of like a 20-year commitment.
Yeah, and the sperm is like, I'm the sperm. I'm here. So am I. Me too. Over there. What? Oh my God! How many of us are there? Oh, I didn't know. I didn't see all that. Oh, jeez. There's only one egg in here?
Yeah. So bottom line, sperm choice by the egg's follicular fluid is not related to who you choose.
Right. So this is also kind of related to quick tangent that in captivity, when we try to breed animals who we decide are genetically a really good match, right? So that's part of the job, is to make sure, especially the endangered species, you have a limited number. You want to make that into as large of a number as you can while reducing bad mutations or recessive genes being exposed. So you pick a good match. Sometimes it still doesn't work. And unless the numbers are extremely low for that individual species, you take that as a sign and you move on and you try to find a new pairing because there's other stuff going on. If it's not working, or if they don't want to mate at all because there's some sort of chemical cue going on, there's something there most likely that we didn't see. So, this is directly related to that. There could be stuff going on in terms of compatibility that we just totally.
I guarantee you, if you will one day figure out, probably not in the too distant future, it's all microbiome.
Yeah.
They got microbes like, no, I don't want those ones.
Except doesn't your microbiome start to resemble each other when you live together?
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely, it does.
But I don't.
So it has to be a good match.
Are you talking about behaviorally, the behavior microbiome? Because I don't think the microbiome is influencing your egg and sperm.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think so. Okay. It doesn't go that deep.
Justin is a microbiome truther.
A truther. Ooh.
Ooch. Loaded word.
It's all the microbiome, you know?
Yeah. And then my last story for the show. I just want you to know we're so similar wherever you are. Wherever you are in the world, you're like me, kind of. We're kind of like each other more than we're not like each other.
Unless you're a jerk. In case you're
then
not.
We're not alike yet.
Then you're not like us. No. Yeah. Like that. Researchers from the University of California, Riverside published a paper in the Journal of Personality this week looking at, they teamed with researchers from 62 countries around the world to ask people a question. What do you remember the most from yesterday? Yes. This was follow-up work from a study that was called The World at 7, which looked into what people were doing at 7 p.m. on the previous day. And they found that people they didn't look at as many countries, they only looked at a couple. They found that people in countries seem to be doing similar stuff around 7 p.m. around the world. This expands on it. This time they're including 15,000 some odd members of university and college communities, 10,771 females, 4,468 males, 79 without a gender chosen, all of them in their early to mid 20s. So when I say we're all the same, I mean collegey mid early 20-year-olds are the same-ish around the world. But from 62 countries around the world, the study did find that, yes, indeed, we're more similar in what we remember from the previous day than not. We tend to remember, actually more likely to remember positive things than we are to remember negative things, which was surprising to everyone based on psychology research that suggests that negative things stand out more in our memory.
Because they're young.
What else am I paying a psychologist for? To tell you how great my day was? No, I'm gonna vent. That's why they're like, everybody has a very negative experience. No, that's just how they talk to you.
When they measured the country that is most like the rest of the world, which country do you think it is?
Wait. How can one country be more like the rest of the world? It has to be China.
On average,
or
no,
India.
Canada.
Whoever's got the biggest population has got to be most like the rest of the world.
Canada is most like the rest of the world.
What does that mean? Are they in the middle?
It's because how do I say this without being insulting? I love Canada. This isn't trying to be an insult at all.
You're gonna call them boring.
Canada's very diverse.
It's just kind of like regular. Not inflammatory. It's regular.
Our Canadian listeners are hating you right now, Blair.
No, it means
yes,
you're great.
Canada.
It means you're not doing anything wrong.
Canada, thanks for being regular.
It's great. I wish more people were regular.
That's gotta be such high praise coming from the United States right now.
That's what I mean.
Being called, you seem normal. Oh yeah, coming from you, I don't know if I want to be normal. Is that an insult? I'm not really sure.
No. I'm saying that they are more stable than our country. It's regular, it's stable, it's consistent. Yeah. It's like things are okay up there,
Yes. As long as you don't look into their treatment of indigenous people, then they seem just normal, just fine, and not at all controversial.
Fair point.
The country that was the most different from other countries was Japan, which surprised me, including the result that people in Japan were one of the, had the lowest homogeneity within their borders. Their people were among the least like their other people.
Wait, what? Really?
Yes. 56 out of 62 in terms of homogeneity.
Okay.
What's going on in Japan?
So,
I would have expected it would have been like Great Britain because of tea time. The fact that they have like very specific ritual throughout the day,
I just remember having tea? What's that?
So they have a very interesting history, Japan, of sort of having multiple time frames of cultural isolation. And so I can see how they may have developed highly unique, even amongst but the homogeneity within the culture. Well, you've got people who are working 14-hour days. Actually, I hear that we work more hours though in the United States.
The Netherlands is the country where that's the most homogeneous. If I can use words, the Netherlands is the most homogeneous. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Everybody has the same bedtime. Mm-hmm. Traffic must be horrible. Everybody's going to be on the road.
Or because it's homogeneous, they're all driving the exact same speed, so it's great.
Yeah.
And their cars are all exactly the same. So when you come out to the parking lot, you're like, ugh. And like everybody else, you don't put a single bumper sticker on your car. So nobody knows. You just hit the button until the alarm goes off and hope nobody else is looking for their car at the same time.
Right.
It's just rough.
The researchers say the findings hold a lesson worth being mindful of in the current climate of unrest during the COVID-19 pandemic. We can only hope that seeing we're all unified in the challenges we face during these trying times will give people an increased sense of global community.
I guess. I don't really feel that connected to most of the country. Within this country, let alone other countries, let alone the state. I feel like different cities have their own unique
I feel happy that the early 20-somethings in the academic community, they're very similar and they have a nice global community going. That gives me hope for the future. There we go.
There you go.
Blair, tell me about those sharks.
Sharks! So, great white sharks. They get a bad rap, guys. This is a study from the University of Sydney, and Australia has its own kind of sordid past with sharks, but I'm going to put that to the side. Ultimately, this is a really interesting study looking at the diets of great white sharks, because when we think about great white sharks, we think about them in the deep, deep part of the ocean, and they are coming up from below to feast on marine mammals, and sometimes accidentally humans, but most of the time not. So mostly it's just marine mammals and occasionally large fish and stuff like that. But so this was a nice look at the stomachs of 40 juvenile white sharks. So these sharks were not too large yet. They were under 2.2 meters in length. So under, what is that, like 8 feet or something like that. So they can get to be much bigger than that. And when they are bigger, they will eat more things like marine mammals. But as juveniles, their diet actually was mostly on 32% was on pelagic or midwater ocean swimming fish like salmon. So that was what you would expect it all to be. But instead, 17% of the stomach's contents were bottom-dwelling fish, 5% were reef fish, and almost 15% were badoid fish like stingrays and bat rays. So what that means is they're hanging out in the shallows. Yeah, in the shallows, and they're eating off of the seafloor and the seabed. So this kind of completely changes how we think great whites eat.
So they're not just in the mid-ocean column. They're kind of all over the place. They're wherever the food is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this expectation that great whites only live in the deepest parts of the ocean, in at least 50 feet deep, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. As long as they're able to keep swimming and keep breathing.
Yeah.
They're fine,
so
right?
This is the other thing I think is interesting is that when I worked at an aquarium, one of the things we told people about great white sharks is that they often hunt by sight. Excuse me. So they hunt by sight. So that's why surfers are sometimes chomped, is because a surfer on top of a surfboard looks a lot like an elephant seal. So
fins,
yeah.
yes.
So because they hunt by sight, this is how this happens. But if they're hunting bottom dwellers that are camouflaged in the sand and buried under the sand, they are not exclusively hunting by sight. So I would like to see more research on that after this study.
Yeah, and also to let more people know that don't be surprised if those great white sharks are coming into the shallow areas where you're surfing.
Yeah,
It's
and
really
I think
not
also
a questionable thing necessarily.
I think the average person might have a hard time identifying a great white shark, especially since there are other, specifically related to juveniles. There are other shark species that look pretty similar to great white sharks and are not, and do not grow large enough to be a threat at all. So there's also a whole issue with misidentification. But ultimately, if they're in the shallows, they're probably too young to be a concern anyway.
Are you talking about young? I mean, baby.
No, don't do it.
Shark,
Don't do it.
Da, 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 da. Baby shark. Do, 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 do.
You're fired.
You can't fire me.
I can't. I'm sorry. That's it. Pack up your knives and go. I don't know.
That is the last straw. That is the last straw. Okay. All right.
Oh, never mind.
Have we done it? Do you have any more stories, Justin?
No, I don't. But that's a good point. Maybe the electrical signals are helping them catch the bottom dwellers.
Yeah.
I like that comment. That's a good one. Sheesh. That's it.
Yeah. The
Could be.
ampullae of Lorenzini. They got on their
Yes.
face.
Amazing sensory organs. Why
electricity
not?
comes
If
through,
you've got
yeah.
them, flaunt them.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to This Week in Science. We have come to the end of another episode. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with a friend. That would be really great. I want to give some shout outs right now. Shout out right now to our wonderful helpers, people who help us make this show possible. Fada, thank you for your help on social media and show descriptions. Gord, thank you for manning the chat room. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show so that we have files of audio. It's amazing. And thank you to the Burroughs Welcome Fund and our Patreon sponsors for their generous support. Thank you to Paul Disney, Andrew Swanson, Stu Pollock, Ed Dyer, Ken Hayes, Kosti Renke, Craig Landon, Tony Steele, Alex Wilson, Steve DeBell, Joshua Fury, Philip Shane, Ed Loves Science, Mark Mazzaros, Richard Porter, Sky Luke, Brian Condren, Richard, Eric Knapp, Jason Roberts, Matthew Litwin, Jack, Bob Calder, Guillaume, Dave Neighbor, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Matt Sutter, Aaron Luthen, Christopher Rappin, Brendan Minish, Greg Briggs, Robert, Gary S., Marjorie, Rudy Garcia, Kurt Larson, Steve Leisman, Sean Lamb, Greg Riley, Jim Drapeau, Lisa Slazewski, Christopher Dreyer, Brian Carrington, Jason Olds, John McKee, Paul Artyom, Ulysses Adkins, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Dave Wilkinson, Sue Doster, Paul Ronovich, Gerald Myshak, Dave Friedel, John Ratnaswamy, Stephen Albaran, South of Gradney, Mountain Sloth, Rodney Lewis, Sarah Chavis, Corinne Benton, John Gridley, Jean Tellier, Patrick Pecoraro, Darwin Hannon, Matt Bass, Dan Kay, Sarah Forfar, Donald Mundus, Howard Tan, Josiah Zahner, Taylor P.S., Ben Bignell, Maddie Perrin, Mark Hessenflow, John Atwood, Ali Coffin, Ben Rothig, John Lee, and Flying Out. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. We can't do it without you. If you're interested in supporting us on Patreon, find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience. On next week's show,
we will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels, as well as from twis.org/live.
Are you sick of looking at us? Want to listen to us as a podcast? Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for our newsletter.
Hey, contact us directly. Email Kirsten at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Hey, that was me. Just put twist TWIS in the subject line, or we're never going to read it because it'll get spam filtered into oblivion.
Yes, but don't give up if that happens. You can still hit us up on the Twitter where we are at Twist Science, at Dr. Key, at Jacksonfly, that's me, and at Blair's Menagerie. That's Blair. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, haiku that comes to you tonight, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world, so I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice, show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand, and all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way, so everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way, so everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.